Okay, so we are learning and going into our new chapter, chapter 12, lesson 2 on estimating sums and differences. You're going to estimate decimal sums and differences. So we're going to now be dealing with the decimal place, okay? So on page 256, the example says, a race car driver had 3 practice laps. About how much time did it take to complete all 3 practice laps? So what's the key word in that question? About how much time did it take to complete all these practice laps? Varsha? About, yes. And what does that word about mean? When you see that word about in math, what does that mean, Gia?
Like, not exactly, but like almost like an estimate.
Very good. Not exact, but an estimate. Okay? So around what is your answer? I don't need an exact answer. I need an estimate of what it would be. And that's what, when you see that word about, that's your key word that should let you know that you're not trying to find an exact answer. Okay? But they want to know how much time it would take for all 3 practice laps. So if you look at the chart there, you see that there's a time for the first practice lap, the second practice lap, and the third practice lap. Okay, so you can see here the 3 times of the first practice lap, second practice lap, and third practice lap. Now, since I don't want to know exactly how much it is, okay, I want to know about, but what am I doing here? What is my operation that I'm working on? Aniket? I need to round them, and also what else do I need to do to find out the answer? Ashika?
Add?
Right, how did you know to add it up?
Because it says how much time did it take to complete all 3 practice?
Right, that all gave it away that you need to sum it up, right? Take the sum of all 3 numbers. So if we round, okay, as Aniket said, and then we're going to add it all together, let's look at the first practice lap. We have 40.058 seconds. In time, what place value should we be rounding to? What would make it easiest for us to get a pretty close answer but not exact? Which place value? Kayura?
The 10th.
The 10th, right. Okay, so that means, remember the rules. 5 and above, you give it a shove. 4 and below, you let it what?
Go.
You let it go. You just let it rest, okay? Give it a rest, okay? So, if you look at 40.058, you look to the right of the 10th place, and that's a 5 there. So 5 and above, you give it a shove. So that means the 0 then turns to a 1. So this rounded would be 40.1. Now, when you're adding decimals, it is crucial that the decimals are what? Aligned. Very good. That they're lined up exactly. Because if you shift a number over even a little bit, it will totally ruin your answer and you'll get a number that's not supposed to be. Okay? Let's look at the second practice lap. We have 38.978. So we look to the right of the 10th place and we see that's a 7. So then you have to give it a shove. But wait, 9 is the highest single digit that I can have in a place value. So what happens then? What happens, Harshith?
Then you have to add 1 to the whole number?
To the next place value, right? Which in this case would be the 1's place. Okay, so we look at the 8, and the 8 becomes a 9. Very good. So this becomes 39. Very good. 0.0. Why is it important that you include that 0.0? Why is it important, Ishika?
Because then it will mess up the decimals being aligned.
Right, you want to make sure you keep that alignment going. Also because you still are rounding to the nearest 10th. It just happened that it's a 0 and gave the 1's place a shove. Okay? The third practice lap, we have 39.242. Again, look at the 10th place, look at the neighbor, and we see that it is a 4. So if it's below that, you give it a rest. So it would be 39.2. Very good. 39.2. Okay? Now, who was it that told me? Yes, Ashika. Told us that in all means we need to add these together. So we take these three numbers and we're going to add. Okay, we're going to find the sum. So you always start on the all the way to the right side, the smallest place value, which in this case is the tenths, and you add from the right to the left, right? So we take 1 plus 0 plus 2, which is?
3.
Very good. Then you bring down the decimal, okay? Don't forget to do that. Okay, don't save it to the end. Do it right then and there, okay? Then you add 0 plus 9 and you get what, Jason?
9.
0 plus 9 plus 9.
Oh, 18.
Thank you. So you have an 8, carry the 1. 4 plus 1 plus 3 is?
11.
Do we all agree?
Yes.
Okay. So we have 118.3. What is my label? Seconds. Very good. It says it right here in the box, right? So we have it took about 118.3 seconds for him to do all 3 practice labs. Okay, so we just did one where we're finding the sum. Let's do one where we have to find the difference, okay? So there's 2 types of problems that you're going to be responsible for doing. One is finding the sum, and one is finding the difference. So if we look at the second example, you will see that it says estimate the difference, and it says 0.139 subtracted by 0.038. Okay, so both of these numbers right now are all the way to the thousands place, right? So if you wanted to find the estimate of it, what should we do? What place value should we round it to? We should be rounding it to the nearest 10. Okay? We should be rounding it to the nearest tenth. Remember, if we're dealing with decimals, we want to try to get to the highest decimal possible, which would be the tenths place. Okay, so let's take a look at 0.139. If we look at the neighbor of the tenths place, it's a 3. So what does that tell us we need to do?
Let it be.
Let it be. Let it rest, right? 0.1. Subtracted by, okay, so we look here, and we look at the neighbor, it's a 3, so we let it rest, and that would give us 0.0. Okay? And remember, you want to line it up, okay? So we do 0.1 minus 0.0. I know that's easy for you to do in your head, and it's a problem that doesn't have much, but you need to get in the habit of lining it up, okay? If you don't start getting in the habit of doing that now, then it won't be common practice for you to do that later when you really will need it when you're dealing with much larger numbers. Okay? So 0.1 minus 0.0 is?
0.1.
Very good. Okay? Okay, so if you look at the top of page 257, number 5, they're asking us to find the estimate by rounding each number to nearest whole number. So we have the problem here, 4.302 minus 2.499, correct? Okay, so if we're going to round to the nearest whole number, we look at 4, which is our whole number. Then we look to the right of that, which is the tenths place, and it's a 3, so we give it a? Let it go, give it a rest, right? And we keep this at 4. Minus, and then we look to the right again, and that's a 4. So what do we do to the 2?
Let it go.
Let it go, okay? So 4 minus 2 equals 2. So my answer is 2.